Welcome back to Indus Special. Continuing with its occupation and suppression of Kashmiris, Indian security forces are now detaining children as young as 9. Before we go further into this discussion, here is a BBC interview by Ejaz Mufti. We are playing this clip because Ms. Mufti's mother's party was in a political alliance with Narendra Modi's BJP. In that capacity, the People's Democratic Party was part of the oppressive policies in the occupied state until Delhi dissolved the assembly and imposed governors and then president's rule in the occupied territory. For Ms. Mufti to say what she's saying, here's the clearest indication of what is going on, because her family was an accomplice to what went on in occupied Kashmir in the run-up to what happened on August 5. Listen to this.
How can Kashmiris give them a chance when they've done this without our consent? And they're doing this in the garb of development, when the truth is that they want to engineer demographic changes in what is the only Muslim majority state in Jammu and Kashmir. Development, the development argument is a deeply flawed one, and it doesn't cut it. You spoke about my mother being in a government with them. We asked them for power projects. I don't know if you're aware, Stephen, but Kashmir has an acute electricity crisis. We produce 4,312 megawatts of hydropower, but the government of India only gives us 13%. And one of the things in our agenda was to return these power projects so that Kashmiris can have electricity like the rest of the cities. But these are things that they were never done.
Let me ask you this as we end. Everything you've said about the Indian government suggests to me that for you for one as a Kashmiri, have little interest now in trying to build bridges, reach out to develop a dialogue with Delhi. But are you ready to talk to Delhi about the future of Kashmir in a constructive way?
What kind of a hope can I have from a government that detains 9-year-old boys, that talks about having a 60-inch chest? That's the kind of rhetoric that they do, but they're scared of 9-year-old boys. What kind of a hope can I have from a government like that? I mean, Kashmiris feel more, they gravitate, they identify more with someone like Imran Khan, who really spoke up for Kashmiris. His speech went on for about half an hour, and Kashmiris really respect the fact that he spoke up for us. And Stephen, the tragedy is that 72 years after the leadership of Jammu and Kashmir acceded to a secular and a democratic India, every Kashmiri today is asking themselves if this was the right choice. Because this country is not Gandhi's India anymore. We're hurtling towards Godse's idea of India, which crushes dissent, which doesn't have space for dissent, which doesn't have space for democracy, which does not want to, embrace people of different ethnicities and cultures. I would say that the soul of this country is being assaulted every day.
Well, there you go. That was Ms. Mufti speaking to the BBC Hard Talk program. We now move on to our discussion, and we are joined by Ambassador Asif Durrani, Dr. Ilhan Niaz, who's a historian and associate professor of history at the Quaid-e-Azam University, Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur, a Kashmiri based in London. Muzzammil, even the Quislings are now speaking up. The Quislings and there are these families that provided that fig leaf of legitimacy to the Indian governments through 72 years. Even they are speaking up now. So essentially, there is no one in Kashmir now that can stand up for what Delhi has done.
You're absolutely right. These Quislings, as you so aptly refer to them, they will always remain stooges of the Indian government. We will always recognize them as former stooges, even now. But you also have to remember what happened after the BBC Hard Talk interview that Shah Faisal had done, another stooge of the Indian government. He was immediately sent to house arrest.
Absolutely.
Now, the fact that Ejaz Mufti has been running her mother's Twitter account for so long, now has done a BBC Hard Talk interview, previous to that did many other interviews, and she's still running around free. What does that indicate? I hope to God that she is not going to be sponsored by the Indian government as the next so-called leader of the people of Kashmir, the same way that they installed the Sheikh Abdullahs and the Farooq Abdullahs and the Umar Abdullahs, and the same way they installed Mufti Saeed and Mehbooba Mufti. Hopefully it will not be that Ejaz Mufti is going to be forced upon us. We will never accept people like that. But when we talk about the last 60 days, today is the 60th day. Let's remember what exactly happens with the people of Kashmir and the kind of communications blackout that has happened inside Kashmir. 13,000 young people that have been arrested, and the kind of things that they've had to witness while they've been in detention. If you're aware, in Shupian, my hometown, where they've taken young boys to the masjid, to the mosque, turned on the loudspeaker where they is supposed to be adhan, and instead the population hears the screams of those young boys being tortured. And that's just Kashmir in the last 60 days. If we go back to 72 years, there are things that I don't even want to mention because they are so cruel. But when we look at the BJP itself and their manifesto and the way that they work, let's also remember that it is not just with Kashmir. Let's look at what happens inside India. If anybody remembers Tabriz Alam, that was butchered and murdered in broad daylight. And then you have the issue of Shambhulal Negar, who burnt a Muslim live while he was live streaming. And then this gentleman was bailed by the BJP so that he could campaign for the BJP's re-election. If India can do this to their own citizens inside India, what would they possibly do to those people that are living inside Kashmir, a de facto and now a de jure occupation?
Absolutely. I have these headlines for me, and they're from various international publications. There's, of course, the Turkish paper, which said that the Turkish parliament speaker said that Turkey has not forgotten friendship of Indian Muslims during independence war, and that Turkey stands with Pakistan on the issue of Kashmir. Then an Indian publication where the advisor to the J&K governor says that the Kashmiri leaders will be released one by one, as he put it, after they have been screened. And then, of course, the New York Times editorial says the UN can't ignore Kashmir anymore. And one of the paragraphs says, while Mr. Modi didn't address the issue, namely the Kashmir issue, in his United Nations speech, at a rally in Houston a few days earlier, he said that revoking the constitutional clause on Kashmiri autonomy meant, quote, people there have got equal rights, unquote, with other Indians now. That's, according to the New York Times editorial, is an absurd assertion to make about a state in the world's largest democracy that's essentially under martial law. And then, of course, the Al Jazeera headline, depressed, frightened, minors held in Kashmir crackdown. Ambassador Durrani, given all of this, do you think that our diplomacy has had some success in relation to the issue?
I think the war has just begun at the diplomatic level because we were also, to tell you the truth, taken by surprise. And no one was ready with regard to Article 370 and 35A being revoked. At least I know the people they were not aware of in the Foreign Office or elsewhere who have been dealing with Kashmir.
Well, the BJP has had that on its manifesto for 2 decades or more. Surely someone has studied the manifesto.
But the timing was India's choosing. It was not our choosing or our warning. So I think you will give this much allowance to the people here, because CIA, despite spending billions of dollars, could not predict the fall of the Soviet Union. And there was a big congressional commission inquiring about that what actually went wrong. So since we don't have a history of having an inquiry that what went wrong and how this could have happened, but at the same time, as you have yourself in your narration, it is almost a lawyer's case when it comes to the international media. And right now, if you have to give credit, you cannot give credit at the moment to Pakistan, but to the international media, which has pleaded the Kashmiri's case. And
the Kashmiri diasporas, frankly, that have really created a groundswell for this, and the Kashmiri intellectuals, based abroad, who have written and spoken on the issue. But let me quickly hop over to Dr. Niaz here, because I just want to get a sense of history from him. Dr. Niaz, of course, we never accepted Article 370 or the affiliate Article 35A. So the issue is not really that. The issue is about India unilaterally changing the status quo and essentially, creating a situation which is that of annexing an occupied territory. But I want to go back to what Muzzammil said, that this is not the first time that the Quislings have been co-opted or are likely to be co-opted. Give us a sense from history of how this played out earlier with Sheikh Abdullah and so on.
Well, it does. Almost from the get-go, the Indian government has used the help of people willing to cooperate with it to legitimize its occupation of Kashmir. And when it has not suited them, of course, they've always been willing to put them under pressure, to lock them up or to otherwise strong-arm them. Since 1989, since the unrest or the insurgency, whatever you want to call it, began in Kashmir, of course, there has already been unprecedented violence perpetrated by the Indian government against the people of Kashmir. And that violence has continued long before, Modi revoked Article 370 or carried out other changes to the Constitution. And so, in a sense, you have a long history of this on and off collaboration, of this use and this disposal. And I would also be concerned, as Muzzammil was earlier, that the New Delhi government might well be now looking for some sort of space to re-engage some of the old collaborators for the next phase, whatever that might be. So in that sense, the Kashmiris, they need to be wary of leopards or tigers pretending to change their stripes or their spots.
Okay. Let me go back to Muzzammil here. Muzzammil, it does seem that there's now a certain kind of groundswell. But this is something that needs to reach a critical mass. I was also looking at, I actually did a program on India's economy, the figure fudging and the rest of it. And I think in the next 6 months, the Modi government is actually looking at a major stagnation in the economy. That process has actually already started. Do you think that is something which could either get him to begin to focus on the economy or use that to create a situation where the majority Hindus begin to look at the minorities as usurpers of jobs and the rest of it, and actually create a violent situation inside India?
It's funny that you should talk about the economy, because just now I received a report. This is from an Indian report. This is not something that somebody can say that this is some kind of biased reporting, that the economy is under 8 core sector industry. My mistake, more bad news for the economy, as 8 core sector industries record negative growth, which includes coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizer, steel, cement, and electricity, which has been recorded at minus 0.5% against 4.7% in August last year. The economy is tanking, completely tanking, and they're trying to cover up this economic problem by the NCR, the National Register of Citizens, by the Kashmir issue, by the minorities, by claiming that the Khalistan movement is a terrorist organization. So they're trying to cover up their own problems by these manufactured issues. And you're absolutely right. There is a very big chance that the Indian government, particularly this BJP fascist government, they have no interest in the greater economy. They have an interest in the greater pan-Hindutva nation. They want to spread their wings as far as possible. We've already heard people like Amit Shah and other quislings of the BJP have said that they want to now take the so-called POK, as we refer to as Azad Kashmir, and they will not stop there. They will go towards Pakistan. When we talk about the Hindus and how they will be pushed to think the propaganda that exists in India. They will be pushed to think that the Muslims, the minorities, it's not just the Muslims. You have to remember, inside India, there are the Christians, the Dalits, the Buddhists, the Sikhs, that they are also under persecution in one way or the other. And it is going to become a massive war. When we talk about World War III, there is going to be a potential World War III. Let's not consider it just between countries. World War III could become a massive civil war within India. You have a 1.3 billion population where even the Muslims in the south of India are completely unhappy with those in the north. They have a completely different language, culture, heritage, identity. They don't subscribe to the ideals of anybody else in the rest of India. So there is a massive problem inside India. And the Indian government will try and clamp down on any dissent. It's not just Kashmir. They are going to spread their wings way beyond their own borders and make sure that their Hindutva ideology, the same ideology that Hitler and Mussolini had, that they are going to implement that far and wide. This is the same ideology that we call fascism. This is the same ideology that we crushed in the 40s and the 50s.
Absolutely, Muzzammil. In fact, some needs to tell the Indians that Azad Kashmir is Azad because the Punchis and people in Gilgit-Baltistan stood up and defeated the Dogra army. So when they talk about taking Azad Kashmir, it basically extracts a laugh from me. Ambassador Durrani, everything that Muzzammil has talked about, these are the fault lines in India. And you've had a long and illustrious career as a diplomat. These are precisely the fault lines that we need to target in a diplomatic offensive.
Yes, we can. And I think this is a high time that opportunity has arisen that we should make use of these opportunities which the Modi-led fascist regime has created these fault lines. These have not cropped up all of a sudden. But of course, these are the opportunities we should. And one thing I agree with Muzzammil, that it would be the unraveling of India, because now the separatist tendencies are going to grow. Already there are problems. Almost 11 insurgencies are there in India. And if this is the attitude of the present dispensation in the country, then I don't think that this country is going to survive. And we have to make plans for that, because then we should not be taken by surprise with the influx of refugees and all that. So we should also gear up for that as well, because
absolutely, we need to think proactively. Thank you. That was Ambassador Asif Durrani speaking with us. Thank you to Muzzammil Ayyub Thakur, also, as always, very insightful. This is all we have today from Indus Special. We shall see you tomorrow. Until then, it's goodbye.